I had the coffee ready before 6 that morning, the way I always do. 41 years of marriage teaches you certain things. You learn which drawer your husband keeps his reading glasses. You learn not to mention his brother at dinner. You learn that black coffee, no sugar, at 6 in the morning is a non-negotiable. The same way the sun rising is non-negotiable. I had it ready. I had everything ready. That was the problem, I think. I had been so busy keeping everything ready that I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening in my own house. My name is Sylvia. I'm 63 years old. I lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house with a wraparound porch and an oak tree in the back that my late mother-in-law called the heart of the property. I believed her. For a long time, I believed a lot of things. My husband's name is Raymond. He's 67, retired civil engineer, built bridges for 30 years, which is ironic because the man cannot build a conversation if his life depends on it. But he's steady. That's what I always said about him. Raymond is steady. He doesn't panic. He doesn't raise his voice. He shows up. I thought that counted for something. We have one son. His name is Patrick. He's 34, lives in Denver, works in renewable energy, and calls me every Sunday whether or not he has anything to say. That's the kind of boy he is. That Sunday call. It kept me going some weeks more than I'd like to admit. Patrick had been home for 10 days that January. His grandmother, my mother, had a hip replacement, and Patrick drove down from Denver without being asked. Just showed up at the airport with his duffel bag and said, "Mom, you shouldn't be doing this alone." He stayed for 10 days and then he had to go back. He had a project deadline. He had a life. I drove him to the Asheville Regional Airport on a Tuesday morning. It was cold. The kind of cold that gets into your coat and stays there. Patrick hugged me at the curb, the way he always does. Both arms tight, like he's trying to transfer something into you before he lets go. He said, "Call me if anything comes up with Grandma." I said I would. I watched him go through the sliding doors. I sat in the car for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I drove back toward home. I was maybe 15 minutes out when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I thought it was Patrick. Maybe he'd forgotten something. Maybe he'd left his charger on the nightstand again the way he always does. I glanced at the screen at a red light. It wasn't Patrick. It was Connie. Connie has worked for us for 11 years. She is not our housekeeper. Not exactly. That word always felt too formal for what she is. She comes 3 days a week. She knows where we keep the spare keys, knows Raymond's allergy to shellfish, knows that I hide good chocolate on the top shelf behind the extra paper towels because Raymond has no self-control around chocolate, and neither do I, honestly. She is 61 years old, sharp as a tack, and in 11 years she has never once texted me anything that wasn't directly about the house. The message said, "Mrs. Sylvia, please don't come home yet. I need you to call me. It's important. Please." I pulled into a gas station parking lot. I called her. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she'd been sitting there with the phone in her hand. "Connie, what's going on?" She was quiet for a second. Not the kind of quiet where someone is thinking. The kind of quiet where someone already knows what they're about to say and is gathering themselves to say it. "Mrs. Sylvia," she said, "I don't want to do this wrong. I've been thinking about whether to say something for a long time now, and I kept telling myself it wasn't my place. But this morning, She stopped. "I found something, and I can't pretend I didn't." My first thought was something practical. A burst pipe. A gas smell. Something wrong with the house itself. "What did you find?" She told me to open my email. She said she'd taken photographs and sent them to me from her personal address because she didn't want them on her phone anymore. She said she was sorry. She said it more than once. I sat in that gas station parking lot with my car idling, and I opened my email on my phone, and I looked at the photographs Connie had sent me. There were 11 of them. The first 3 were bank statements. Not ours, or rather, not mine. An account at a credit union in Hendersonville I had never heard of, opened 14 months ago in Raymond's name only. The balance was $214,000. I want you to understand something. Raymond and I have always handled our finances jointly. It was something we agreed on before we were even married. Everything shared, everything transparent. It was the one thing I was proud of about us. The thing I told my daughter-in-law about when Patrick got engaged. Keep her finances honest, I'd said. That's the foundation. $214,000 in an account I didn't know existed. I kept scrolling. The next photographs were harder to look at. They were printouts, folded, then unfolded, then left in a drawer in Raymond's office. Connie found them when she was cleaning. She said she almost put them back. She said her hand was actually moving to fold them up again when something made her stop. They were from a real estate attorney in Brevard, about 40 minutes from Asheville. The paperwork was for a property, a cabin on 3 acres near the Piskey National Forest. The purchase had been finalized 8 months ago. The deed listed one owner, Raymond's name, and a woman named Patricia Obrey. I had to read that twice. Then a third time, Patricia Obrey. I didn't know that name. I had never heard Raymond say that name. In 41 years of marriage, I had never heard him mention anyone named Patricia. The last photographs were the ones Connie apologized for the most when I called her back. They were screenshots. She'd taken them off Raymond's tablet, which he'd left on the kitchen counter that morning before he went out to his woodworking group. She said the tablet was open, just sitting there, screen still on. She said she didn't go looking. The messages were between Raymond and this woman. They went back almost 2 years. They were not ambiguous. They were not something I could explain away or reframe or give the benefit of the doubt to. They were what they were. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. A man came out of the gas station with a bag of chips and a fountain drink and got into the truck next to me and drove away and had no idea that my entire life was rearranging itself around me. The ordinary world just kept going. That's the part no one prepares you for. I called Connie back. "Are you still at the house?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Is Raymond there?" "No. He left about an hour ago. Said he'd be at the woodworking club until noon." I looked at the clock on my dashboard. It was 8:47. "Connie," I said, "don't touch anything. I'm coming home." She was standing on the porch when I pulled into the driveway. She had her coat on, even though she'd been inside all morning. She looked like a woman who had been dreading this conversation for weeks and was relieved and terrified in equal measure that it was finally happening. I hugged her before she could say anything. She's not a woman who cries easily. She's told me that about herself. But she held on to that hug for a moment, and I felt her breathe. We went inside and sat at the kitchen table, and she walked me through everything she'd found, in order, the way you'd give testimony. She was careful. She was precise. She kept saying, "I'm sorry," and I kept telling her she had nothing to be sorry for. I almost didn't say anything, she told me. I kept thinking, this isn't my marriage. This isn't my business. Who am I to come in here and blow up someone's life? "You didn't blow it up," I said. "It was already blown up. You just made sure I knew." She looked at the table for a moment. "I kept thinking about what would happen if you didn't find out," she said. "If he just kept going. And you kept making the coffee and driving him to his appointments and not knowing. And I thought I wouldn't want that for myself. I wouldn't want someone to know and say nothing." I thought about that for a long time afterward. I still think about it. After Connie left that afternoon, I sat in Raymond's office alone. I opened the drawer where she had found the real estate documents. I looked through everything methodically, the way you do when you're trying not to feel anything yet, because you know the feeling is coming and it will be large and you need to get through the practical part first. There was more than she'd found. A second set of documents, a will revision drafted 6 months ago. I wasn't removed from it entirely, but the language had been changed in ways that mattered. Certain investment accounts had been moved into a structure that would have made them difficult to access in a divorce proceeding. I'm not an attorney, but I'd been a paralegal for 19 years before I retired, and I know what purposeful financial language looks like. Raymond had been planning this, not impulsively, not carelessly, carefully, methodically, the same way he engineered bridges, load capacity, stress points, how much weight the structure could bear before it failed. He had calculated how much of our life together he could take when he left. I called my attorney that afternoon. Her name is Beverly. She's been my attorney for 20 years, handled my mother's estate, helped me with Patrick's guardianship paperwork when he was going through his accident recovery. She answered on the second ring, and I told her what I'd found, and she said, "Sylvia, don't move a single piece of paper. Don't confront him. Come see me tomorrow morning, first thing." I asked her if I should call Patrick. She said not yet, not until we knew exactly what we were dealing with. That was the hardest part of the next 24 hours. Not sitting across the dinner table from Raymond that evening while he talked about the grain pattern on the walnut he'd been working with at the woodworking club. Not listening to him tell me about something he'd read in the paper. Not watching him fall asleep in the armchair with the television on, the way he always does, the way that used to make me feel something tender and now made me feel like I was looking at a stranger wearing a very convincing mask. The hardest part was not calling Patrick. I met with Beverly the next morning. I brought everything, the photographs Connie had sent, the documents from Raymond's office, everything I'd been able to photograph on my own phone the afternoon before. Beverly sat across from me and went through all of it, and she was very quiet and very focused, and when she was done, she looked up and said, "You were a paralegal. You know what this is." "I know what it is," I said. "He's been positioning assets for at least 14 months, she said. "Probably longer. The will revision alone. Sylvia, that's not something you do on a whim." We talked for 2 hours. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. I had a forensic accountant being brought in. I had a process server on standby. I had Beverly's absolute assurance that by the time Raymond's attorney, whoever that turned out to be, figured out what we knew, it would be too late for him to undo any of it. I drove home and made the coffee and waited. It took 11 days. On a Wednesday morning, Beverly called me and said we were ready. That afternoon, Raymond was served at the woodworking club. I know because one of the women there, someone I've known for 15 years who'd been told only that there was an urgent legal matter, called me afterward and said he'd gone completely white. She said he'd sat down in a chair and just stared at the documents for a long time without moving. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Raymond called me 4 times that afternoon. I let them go to voicemail. His attorney called Beverly. Offers were made and rejected. By the time Raymond came home that evening, the landscape had already shifted so far in my favor that his attorney, apparently, had advised him there was very little point in fighting it. He came into the kitchen. I was sitting at the table with a cup of tea. I watched him come in and put his keys on the counter and stand there, and I thought, this is the last ordinary moment. After this, nothing goes back. "You know?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. He looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe explain. Maybe apologize. I watched him decide not to. He asked if he should get a hotel. I said yes. He packed a bag. He left. The oak tree in the backyard was visible through the kitchen window, and I sat there until it got dark and the tree disappeared into the evening. I called Patrick that night. He was quiet while I talked, the kind of quiet that is not absence but presence. He was there. He was taking in every word. When I finished, he said, "Mom, I'm getting on a plane." I told him he didn't have to. He said, "I know I don't have to." He was at my door by 11 the next morning. The part that took the longest to understand was not the betrayal exactly. It was the arithmetic of it. 14 months of planning, 2 years of messages, a property 40 minutes away that I'd never seen, could have driven past on any given weekend without knowing. 41 years of marriage, and somewhere inside all of that, a whole other architecture had been built. You think you know someone. You think that decades of shared mornings, shared dinners, shared losses and recoveries and ordinary Tuesdays, you think that adds up to something unshakable. And it does. It adds up to a life. But a life, I learned, is not the same as a guarantee. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. The cabin near Pisgah went into the settlement. The hidden credit union account was split. The will revision was invalidated. Beverly was thorough, and Beverly was good, and I will send her a Christmas card every year for the rest of my life. Raymond and Patricia Oubre are still together, as far as I know. I don't keep track. What I do keep track of is this. Connie still works for me. 3 days a week, the same as always. She still knows where the good chocolate is. She still comes in on Mondays, and sometimes we have coffee before she starts, and we talk about her grandchildren and her garden and what she watched on television over the weekend. I asked her once, a few months after everything was over, what made her finally decide to say something. She'd told me she'd been sitting on what she knew for a while. She told me she'd almost talked herself out of it more than once. She'd thought about it for a moment. I kept picturing you, she said, making his coffee before 6 in the morning every single day and not knowing. She shook her head. I thought somebody ought to tell her. Somebody who actually cares about her ought to tell her. I've thought about that a lot. There's something particular about being protected by someone who has no obligation to protect you. Someone who could have looked the other way, told herself it wasn't her business, gone about her day. Connie could have done that. She had every logical reason to do that. Instead, she sat at my kitchen table with her coat on and her hands folded, and she told me the truth because she thought I deserved to know it. In 41 years of marriage, I thought I knew who was in my corner. It turned out I'd been underestimating the people who actually were. I'm 63 years old. I live alone now in the colonial with the wraparound porch and the oak tree my mother-in-law loved. Patrick calls every Sunday. Beverly sends a newsletter every quarter. Connie comes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I still make coffee before 6 in the morning, but now I make it for myself, and it tastes exactly the way I want it to. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened, more time than I expected, honestly, because I thought the end of a 41-year marriage would leave me busier somehow, busier grieving, busier fighting, busier falling apart. Instead, it left me quiet, and in that quiet, I started to see things more clearly than I had in years. What Raymond didn't happen overnight. That's the part I keep coming back to. 14 months of a hidden account, 2 years of messages, a property 40 minutes from our house with another woman's name on the deed. None of that is impulsive. None of that is a mistake. That is a series of choices, made one at a time, each one building on the last, each one requiring him to look at me across the dinner table and decide again to continue. The consequences he's living with now are not bad luck. They are the architecture of what he built. I don't say that was bitterness. I say it because it's the only thing that makes sense to me. We talk about betrayal like it arrives all at once, like a storm. But it doesn't. It accumulates. And so does the reckoning. What Connie did, that took something I didn't fully appreciate until I was sitting alone in Raymond's office going through those documents. It would have been so easy for her to say nothing, easier even. She had worked for us for 11 years. She had a job she needed. She had no guarantee I would believe her. No guarantee I wouldn't be angry at her for interfering. No guarantee that doing the right thing wouldn't cost her everything. She made the harder choice anyway. That kind of integrity, the kind that nobody sees, that nobody rewards you for in the moment, that you do entirely because you've decided who you are. That is not a small thing. That is actually quite rare. I think about the version of me that never found out, that kept making the coffee, that kept driving Raymond to his appointments and sitting across from him at dinner and building a life on a foundation that had already been quietly hollowed out. I think about how long that could have gone on, and I think about what it cost Connie, emotionally, professionally, personally, to make sure that version of my life didn't continue. She gave me back my own story. That's what I keep landing on. She gave me the information I needed to make real choices about my own life, when someone I trusted had decided to take that away from me. What I know now, at 63, that I didn't fully understand before. Intelligence is not just about what you know. It's about being willing to look at what's in front of you, even when it's painful. Raymond was a smart man. He built bridges. He understood load and structure and the precise point at which something gives way. And yet he thought he could build a secret life 40 minutes from home and it would hold. It didn't hold because it was never going to hold. Things built on concealment eventually show their weight. I did not fall apart. I called my attorney. I sat with what I knew. I made a plan. That is not because I am exceptionally strong. I spent more than one night in that quiet house feeling very small. It is because I decided that the rest of my life was worth protecting and that I was capable of protecting it. The oak tree is still in the backyard. My mother-in-law was right about it. It is the heart of the property. It was there before Raymond, and it is still there now. Some things hold.